Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into something absolutely terrifying. A world where madness wears a crown, where serving your king means risking your sanity, and where conquest becomes a blood-soaked descent into hell. We're diving into what it was really like to work for Cambyses, the most psychotic ruler in ancient history. Forget the noble Persian kings from your history books. The truth? You probably wouldn't last a week in Cambyses' court without either losing your mind or losing your head. So before we enter this nightmare together, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you're ready for the brutal reality of serving a madman with unlimited power. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from tonight. It's incredible to see who's brave enough to witness these dark chapters of imperial madness with me. Now dim those lights, maybe grab something strong to drink. You're going to need it. Picture the conquered palaces of Memphis, where Egyptian grandeur meets Persian paranoia. And let's step into this horror story together. The tale of how the son of history's greatest conqueror became its most dangerous lunatic. Congratulations, you've just woken up as a court official in the Persian Empire. Around 525 BCE, the sun rises over Memphis, casting long shadows across the conquered Egyptian capital. And you can already smell trouble brewing like bitter wine in clay jars. That metallic taste in your mouth, that's not morning breath, that's fear. Because you're about to serve under the most psychotic ruler in ancient history. Your boss is Cambyses, son of Cyrus the Great. And he's having what modern psychiatrists would call a complete psychotic break. Except in ancient Persia, there's no therapy, no medication, and definitely no disability leave. There's just you trying to stay alive while working for a king who thinks stabbing sacred bulls and burying people alive counts as reasonable foreign policy. Welcome to the Persian Empire, where conquest is the business model and sanity is optional. You stumble through the corridors of what used to be Pharaoh Amasis's palace, now repurposed as Persian administrative headquarters. The walls still bear Egyptian hieroglyphs, but Persian guards lean against them like they're spray-painted subway tunnels. The cultural clash hits you like a war chariot. Ancient Egyptian sophistication meets Persian military efficiency, and the result smells like incense mixed with horse sweat and conquering army rations. The palace itself tells the story of conquest in architectural language. Egyptian columns carved with lotus motifs now support Persian banners depicting Ahura Mazda, the supreme god of Zoroastrianism. It's like watching someone redecorate the Louvre with IKEA furniture, technically functional, but culturally devastating. Egyptian servants move through these halls with the particular kind of careful silence that comes from serving occupying forces. Their movements are calculated to attract minimal attention, while accomplishing maximum efficiency. Everyone understands that visibility equals vulnerability when your new rulers view your entire civilization as an obstacle to be eliminated. A eunuch appears at your door, his face pale as papyrus. Persian court protocol requires eunuchs for sensitive communications, because they can't father dynasties that might threaten royal authority. This particular eunuch has the haunted look of someone who's seen too much and survived by perfecting the art of selective blindness. The king demands your presence immediately, he whispers, glancing around like Cambyses might be hiding behind the furniture. There's been an incident with the priests. Your stomach drops faster than a pyramid stone. In Cambyses' court, incidents with priests usually mean someone's about to become a human sacrifice to the king's paranoia. Egyptian priests are already walking on eggshells since the conquest, and Cambyses has been showing increasing hostility toward anything that reminds him he's ruling a civilization older and more sophisticated than his own. The eunuch's body language tells you everything you need to know about the severity of this particular incident. His hands shake slightly as he delivers the message, and he keeps glancing toward the exits like he's calculating escape routes. In Persian court culture, messengers who bring bad news often share the fate of whatever catastrophe they're reporting. You hurry through hallways where Persian soldiers stand guard next to Egyptian statues, creating the kind of cultural cognitive dissonance that makes your brain hurt. Everything about this conquest feels wrong, like watching barbarians redecorate the Louvre with animal skins and battle axes. The Persian guards are professional killers, recruited from nomadic tribes that view warfare as a family business passed down through generations. They wear scale armor that glints like snake skin in the morning light, and their weapons are sharp enough to split hairs and heads with equal efficiency. These aren't the ceremonial palace guards of Egyptian pharaohs. They're combat veterans who've conquered half the known world and aren't impressed by architectural grandeur. Egyptian art covers every surface of these corridors: painted scenes of gods and mortals, hieroglyphic texts recording thousands of years of history, relief carvings depicting religious ceremonies and royal achievements. But now Persian soldiers use these priceless artifacts as background decoration for their military equipment. Spears lean against walls covered with images of Egyptian deities, while armor racks block doorways designed for ritual processions. The cultural vandalism isn't accidental. It's a deliberate statement about the new power hierarchy. Every Persian sword resting against an Egyptian religious symbol sends a clear message: your gods are powerless, your history is irrelevant, your civilization exists at our pleasure. The palace buzzes with nervous energy. Servants scurry past, carrying scrolls and sacred objects. Their movements quick and furtive. Everyone's trying to look busy and invisible simultaneously, the universal body language of people working for an unstable dictator. You notice how the Egyptian staff has adapted to occupation. They've learned to move in small groups, never lingering in one place long enough to attract Persian attention. They've mastered the art of productive-looking activity that accomplishes essential tasks while appearing completely non-threatening to their new masters. The Persian Empire operates on a fundamentally different cultural logic than Egyptian civilization. Egyptians measure success in terms of permanence, buildings that last millennia, religious traditions that remain unchanged for centuries, artistic styles that achieve perfection and then maintain it across generations. Persians measure success in terms of expansion, territory conquered, enemies defeated, tribute extracted. Persian culture is dynamic and adaptive, absorbing useful elements from conquered civilizations while discarding anything that doesn't serve imperial purposes. This creates inevitable conflict when Persian efficiency meets Egyptian sophistication. Persian administrators see Egyptian religious complexity as bureaucratic inefficiency. Egyptian priests view Persian adaptability as cultural contamination. Neither side understands the other's fundamental values. The result is a collision between two incompatible worldviews, played out in the corridors and courtyards of palaces that were designed to celebrate one civilization and are now being used to administer its conquest by another. Persian soldiers patrol streets that were laid out according to religious astronomical calculations. Persian tax collectors use buildings designed for sacred ceremonies to conduct mundane administrative business. Persian horses drink from pools that Egyptians consider holy water sources. It's like using a cathedral as a parking garage, technically possible, but spiritually devastating to everyone who understood the original purpose. You enter the main courtyard to find chaos that would make a battlefield look organized. Egyptian priests kneel in rows, their shaved heads gleaming with sweat and terror. Before them stands the sacred Apis bull, or what's left of it, the magnificent black bull, worshipped as the living embodiment of the god Pos, lies bleeding from a sword wound to its thigh. The Apis bull isn't just any sacred animal, it's the most important religious symbol in Egyptian theology. Egyptians believe this bull is literally the soul of Pas, made manifest in physical form. Its death doesn't just represent the killing of an animal, it's the murder of a god performed in public to demonstrate Persian supremacy over Egyptian beliefs. The bull itself is massive, probably weighing over 1,000 pounds, with distinctive markings that Egyptian priests have been documenting for centuries. Its black hide is broken by specific white patterns that religious authorities interpret as divine signs. This isn't just livestock, it's a living theological document that validates Egyptian religious tradition. Cambyses stands over the dying animal, his royal robes splattered with blood, laughing like he's just heard the funniest joke in the ancient world. His eyes hold the particular gleam that comes with absolute power combined with complete mental breakdown. The look of someone who's realized that when you're a god king, the only entertainment left is destruction. The Persian king's physical appearance tells its own story about his mental deterioration. His beard, traditionally well groomed according to Persian royal fashion, now looks wild and unkempt. His robes, usually arranged with military precision, hang loosely on a frame that's become gaunt from the stress of constant paranoia. "Look at your god," he shouts at the prostrate priests, his voice echoing off palace walls that have witnessed thousands of years of religious ceremony. "See how he bleeds like any common animal. Where is his divine protection now?" The priests weep, not just for their god, but because they understand what you're beginning to grasp. Cambyses isn't just conquering Egypt. He's trying to destroy the very concept of Egyptian civilization. This isn't military occupation, it's cultural genocide with a crown on top. The theological implications of this act extend far beyond simple religious vandalism. In Egyptian belief, the death of the Apis bull, under these circumstances, doesn't just prove that Egyptian gods are weak, it suggests that the cosmic order itself is breaking down. If the god Pa can be murdered by a foreign king, then perhaps all divine protection has been withdrawn from Egypt. What makes Cambyses particularly terrifying isn't just his cruelty, it's his intelligence. This isn't random violence, it's systematic psychological warfare designed to break Egyptian resistance by destroying their religious and cultural foundation. Every action is calculated for maximum humiliation. Stabbing the Apis bull isn't just killing an animal, it's proving that Egyptian gods are powerless against Persian steel. Forcing priests to watch their deity die isn't just cruelty, it's theological warfare, demonstrating that the entire Egyptian worldview is false. Cambyses understands something that modern occupying forces often miss. You can't truly conquer a people until you've conquered their souls. Physical occupation controls territory, cultural destruction controls minds. By attacking Egyptian religion, he's attempting to eliminate the psychological foundation that makes Egyptian resistance possible. The systematic nature of his cultural warfare becomes clear when you examine the sequence of his actions. First, he conquered Egyptian military forces, eliminating physical resistance. Second, he occupied major cities and strategic locations, establishing territorial control. Third, he targeted religious institutions and symbols, destroying psychological resistance. Each phase builds on the previous one, creating a comprehensive strategy for permanent subjugation that goes far beyond traditional military conquest. Cambyses isn't just trying to extract tribute from Egypt. He's trying to eliminate Egypt as a distinct cultural entity. but there's a deeper psychological dimension to his campaign that he may not fully understand. The systematic brutality required for cultural genocide takes an enormous psychological toll on the perpetrator. Each act of deliberate cruelty pushes the perpetrator further from normal human empathy, making it easier to commit the next atrocity, but harder to maintain basic psychological stability. You watch in horror as Cambyses kicks the dying bull, his laughter becoming increasingly unhinged. The Persian courtiers around him maintain carefully neutral expressions. The kind of professional poker faces that keep you alive when your boss has gone completely insane, but still controls the world's most powerful military. Persian court protocol normally encourages honest counsel and direct communication between rulers and advisors. Persian kings traditionally value advisors who will speak truth to power even when that truth is uncomfortable or challenging. This cultural norm has helped Persian rulers make better decisions and avoid the isolation that destroys many absolute monarchs. But Cambyses' increasing paranoia has made honest counsel impossible. Any advisor who questions his judgment risks being branded as a traitor or Egyptian sympathizer. Any suggestion that his methods might be counterproductive gets interpreted as evidence of disloyalty, requiring immediate punishment. The result is a feedback loop that accelerates his mental deterioration. As he becomes more paranoid, he receives less accurate information about the consequences of his actions. As he receives less accurate information, he makes worse decisions that require increasingly elaborate justifications. As his justifications become more detached from reality, his paranoia increases. Persian courtiers have developed survival strategies that would be familiar to anyone who's worked in a toxic corporate environment run by a narcissistic CEO. They've learned to anticipate his moods, validate his delusions, and redirect his anger towards safe targets that won't threaten their own survival. The court operates under layers of fear, so thick you could cut them with a ceremonial dagger. Everyone smiles. Everyone agrees with everything the king says. Everyone pretends his increasingly bizarre orders make perfect sense. It's like working in a startup where the founder is Ted Bundy and the board of directors consists of his victims' families. What makes this situation particularly surreal is that the Persian Empire continues functioning efficiently even as its ruler descends into homicidal mania. The administrative machinery Cyrus the Great built is so robust that it can operate on autopilot, while Cambyses focuses on creative ways to violate every norm of civilized behavior. Tax collection continues, military units receive orders and supplies, trade routes remain secure, provincial governors submit reports on schedule. The empire runs like a well-oiled machine, and that machine happens to be operated by someone who thinks human sacrifice is a reasonable response to administrative challenges. Persian bureaucracy was designed for conquest and occupation, with detailed protocols for managing conquered populations. Those protocols assume the ruler will be cruel but rational, harsh but predictable. They weren't designed to handle a king who makes decisions based on fever dreams and personal entertainment value. You spend your mornings reviewing tribute assessments from conquered territories and your afternoons watching Cambyses devise new forms of psychological torture for Egyptian religious leaders. It's like working for Amazon if Jeff Bezos decided employee motivation required ritual human sacrifice in the warehouse break rooms. The disconnect between administrative efficiency and royal insanity creates its own form of cognitive dissonance. You're simultaneously documenting the most successful imperial expansion in human history and witnessing the complete mental breakdown of the person responsible for that success. Persian administrative documents from this period read like bureaucratic science fiction, detailed reports on grain storage and tax collection mixed with casual references to royal orders for mass executions and religious desecration. The contrast between mundane competence and psychotic brutality appears in the same scrolls, often in the same paragraphs. Cambyses' religious warfare isn't just morally reprehensible, it's economically catastrophic. Egyptian priests don't just perform religious ceremonies, they manage vast temple complexes that control agricultural production, craft industries, and trade networks. By targeting the religious hierarchy, Cambyses is accidentally dismantling the economic infrastructure that makes Egypt worth conquering. Egyptian temple complexes function as integrated economic units that combine religious ceremony with practical administration. Priests manage irrigation systems, oversee craft workshops, operate granaries, and coordinate trade relationships. They're not just spiritual leaders, they're the middle management of Egyptian civilization. The systematic destruction of this religious infrastructure creates immediate economic consequences. Agricultural coordination breaks down when the priests who managed planting schedules are dead or fled. Craft production declines when the workshops attached to temples shut down. Trade relationships collapse when the religious festivals that facilitated commerce are banned or disrupted. Egyptian wealth depends on social stability and cultural continuity. The elaborate religious calendar determines agricultural cycles. Priest-managed workshops produce luxury goods for international trade. Temple schools train the scribes and engineers who maintain irrigation systems and architectural projects. Cambyses' psychological warfare is like burning down the factory while trying to steal its products. Each religious violation makes Egypt less profitable for Persian administration, but he's too focused on cultural destruction to notice the economic consequences. The Persian Empire's long-term financial health depends on extracting sustainable tribute from conquered territories. Egypt should be the empire's most valuable province, generating revenue for decades. Instead, Cambyses is turning it into a wasteland that will require expensive military occupation just to maintain basic order. While you're documenting Cambyses' daily atrocities and trying to stay off his target list, his behavior toward his own family provides an even more disturbing window into his psychological deterioration. Persian royal culture normally emphasizes family loyalty and dynastic continuity, but Cambyses has begun viewing his relatives as threats requiring elimination. Yesterday, he ordered the execution of his own brother Smerdis, based on a dream. Not evidence of treason, not political necessity, a literal dream where someone told him Smerdis was sitting on the royal throne. The execution was carried out immediately, efficiently, without question, because that's how Persian bureaucracy works when your CEO is a psychopath. The murder of Smerdis represents more than fraternal paranoia. It's a complete breakdown of the succession planning that keeps dynasties stable. Smerdis was the designated heir, carefully trained in royal administration and military command. His death leaves the Persian Empire without a clear succession plan, creating a power vacuum that ambitious nobles will inevitably try to exploit. Persian royal marriages are complicated, designed to keep power within the family line, regardless of what modern sensibilities might say about the arrangement. Cambyses' marriage to his sister follows Persian royal tradition, but his treatment of her reveals how completely his judgment has deteriorated. Today, he's moved on to targeting his sister wife with the same paranoid suspicion he applied to his brother. Persian court gossip suggests she's being watched constantly, her conversations monitored, her movements restricted. The woman, who should be his closest ally and most trusted advisor, has become another potential threat, requiring surveillance and control. The psychological pattern is clear. Cambyses can no longer distinguish between love and threat, loyalty and conspiracy, family and enemy. Anyone close enough to matter becomes close enough to betray, creating a spiral of isolation that eliminates the emotional connections that might anchor his sanity. Persian court culture under Cambyses, has evolved into a sophisticated system for managing lethal paranoia. While maintaining imperial administration, courtiers have developed elaborate protocols for staying alive in an environment where royal favor can shift from blessing to death sentence without warning. The basic survival strategy involves making yourself useful enough to live, but not powerful enough to threaten. Court officials perfect the art of competent invisibility, accomplishing essential tasks while avoiding any action that might be interpreted as ambition, disloyalty, or excessive intelligence. Conversation becomes a minefield where every word carries potential death penalty consequence. Agreeing too enthusiastically with royal decisions might suggest sarcasm. Disagreeing might indicate treason. Offering unsolicited advice could be interpreted as presumption. Remaining silent might imply sullen resistance. Persian courtiers developed the particular skill set that enables survival in toxic environments, reading micro-expressions, the signs of royal mood changes, anticipating paranoid interpretations of innocent actions, deflecting royal anger towards safer targets, and maintaining enthusiastic facades while internally calculating escape strategies. The court operates under multiple layers of surveillance and counter-surveillance. Everyone watches everyone else for signs of disloyalty that might need reporting to save their own lives. Friendships become impossible because today's ally might be tomorrow's informant. Trust disappears completely because survival depends on being willing to sacrifice anyone to preserve yourself. While Cambyses is busy transforming Egypt into a wasteland and murdering his own family members, a much larger crisis is developing back in Persia. The king's absence from the imperial capital has created a power vacuum that ambitious courtiers are beginning to exploit. The execution of Smerdis eliminated the designated heir, but it didn't eliminate the need for succession planning. Persian noble families understand that empires without clear leadership eventually collapse into civil war, taking everyone down with them. Someone needs to provide the stability that Cambyses has abandoned. Enter Go-Mata the Magian, a priest who bears enough physical resemblance to Smerdis to impersonate him convincingly. His claim to royal authority is completely fraudulent, but fraud that provides stability often proves more attractive than legitimate authority that creates chaos. The communications lag between Egypt and Persia means news travels slowly and unreliably. By the time Cambyses learns about the rebellion, Go-Mata will have had months to consolidate power and eliminate potential opposition. Ancient logistics make rapid response impossible, giving usurpers significant advantages if they can maintain their deception long enough. Go-Mata's success depends on Persian nobles preferring predictable impostor rule to unpredictable madness. It's a damning indictment of Cambyses' leadership that his subjects would rather be governed by a lying priest than their legitimate king, but the preference makes perfect sense when the legitimate king has become a homicidal maniac. Persian imperial culture values competence over legitimacy when forced to choose between them. A fake king who maintains order and prosperity will receive more support than a real king who creates chaos and destruction. Go-Mata understands this dynamic and positions himself as the rational alternative to Cambyses' insanity. Just when you think Cambyses' decision-making couldn't get worse, he announces his next brilliant strategic move, an invasion of Ethiopia. Not the Ethiopia you know from modern geography. This is the legendary land of the long-lived Ethiopians that ancient Greeks and Persians considered the edge of the inhabited world. The logistics are nightmarish. Ethiopia lies beyond the Sahara Desert, accessible only through territories that lack reliable water sources, established supply routes, or known geographic landmarks. It's like planning to invade Mars. using ancient military technology and classical era geographic knowledge. Cambyses' preparation for this expedition demonstrates how completely his judgment has deteriorated. Instead of building supply depots, establishing communication lines, or gathering reliable intelligence, he sends spies disguised as gift-bearers to ask the Ethiopian king about something called the Table of the Sun. The Table of the Sun represents everything wrong with Cambyses' approach to the Ethiopian campaign. Instead of focusing on practical military concerns like water sources, defensive positions, or enemy troop strength, he's obsessed with investigating mythical religious phenomena that may not even exist. Ancient military campaigns require months of logistical preparation, accumulating supplies, training troops, establishing communication networks, negotiating with allies, gathering intelligence about enemy capabilities and intentions. Successful generals understand that victory depends on boring administrative details, not dramatic gestures, but Cambyses has moved beyond practical military planning into fantasy fulfillment. He's no longer trying to achieve strategic objectives through efficient means. He's trying to prove his divinity through impossible accomplishments that will demonstrate his superiority to both gods and mortals. The Ethiopian king's response to Cambyses' diplomatic overtures is basically ancient trash talk delivered with maximum insult potential. He sends back a huge bow with a message saying Persians should learn to draw bows this size before they think about invading Ethiopia. The bow itself is a masterpiece of psychological warfare. It's not just a weapon, it's a demonstration of Ethiopian military capabilities disguised as diplomatic correspondence. The message is clear: our warriors are so strong, they can draw bows that your soldiers can't even lift, let alone use effectively in combat. Ethiopian military technology represents a different approach to warfare than Persian methods. While Persians rely on massed infantry formations and coordinated cavalry charges, Ethiopians apparently specialize in individual combat skills and superior physical conditioning. The bow serves as evidence that Ethiopian soldiers possess capabilities that Persian training can't match. Any rational military commander would recognize this as evidence that Ethiopian forces are well prepared and confident about their defensive capabilities. A competent strategist would use this information to reassess the invasion plan, gather additional intelligence, and develop tactics specifically designed to counter Ethiopian advantages. Cambyses interprets it as a personal challenge to his masculinity and divine authority. Rather than viewing the bow as military intelligence, he sees it as an insult requiring violent response. His reaction demonstrates how completely his judgment has deteriorated. He can no longer distinguish between strategic assessment and emotional validation. The Ethiopian king's psychological insight into Persian royal character proves remarkably accurate. He correctly predicts that Cambyses will respond to rational deterrence as personal provocation, ensuring that the Persian invasion will proceed despite obvious logistical impossibilities. The Ethiopian expedition becomes a textbook example of how imperial overconfidence can transform military superiority into catastrophic failure. Cambyses assembles a massive army, probably 50,000 men, and marches them directly into one of the most hostile environments on Earth. Ancient armies move slowly under the best circumstances in desert conditions. With inadequate supplies and no reliable maps, they move even slower while consuming resources at unsustainable rates. The mathematics are brutally simple. Each soldier requires roughly 3 pounds of food and 2 gallons of water per day, plus fodder for horses and pack animals. Persian military logistics, designed for campaigns in well-mapped territories with established supply networks, break down completely in the Ethiopian highlands. There are no cities to resupply from, no local populations, to conscript as laborers, no established routes that guarantee water access. The army's supply train becomes larger than the fighting force itself. Every additional mile of advance requires more resources to maintain the lengthening supply line, while the hostile environment eliminates opportunities for foraging or local resource acquisition. Within weeks, the expedition is consuming its supplies faster than the foraging parties can replenish them. The cruel mathematics of desert warfare assert themselves. The army needs more food and water than the environment can provide, creating a death spiral that can only end in retreat or annihilation. Persian discipline, stressed by months of futile campaigning in Egypt, begins breaking down as supply shortages become critical and casualty rates accelerate. Units start abandoning equipment to increase marching speed. Sick and wounded soldiers get left behind because the army can't spare resources for medical care. You watch from Memphis as reports trickle back describing the army's deterioration. First, they run out of pack animals, consumed as emergency rations. Then they start eating the horses. Finally, in scenes that would traumatize modern war correspondents, they begin selecting soldiers by lottery for cannibalism. The progression from military campaign to horror show follows predictable stages that illuminate the complete breakdown of Persian military organization. Initially, commanders maintain discipline by rationing existing supplies and organizing foraging expeditions. This works temporarily, but can't solve the fundamental problem of operating in territory that can't support large military forces. The consumption of pack animals represents the transition from temporary hardship to operational crisis. These animals aren't just transportation. They're essential for maintaining communication with Persian bases and carrying the equipment necessary for military effectiveness. Eating them provides short-term caloric relief while eliminating long-term operational capabilities. The slaughter of horses marks the point where the expedition transforms from military campaign to survival situation. Persian warfare depends heavily on cavalry for reconnaissance, communication, and tactical mobility. An army without horses becomes a slow-moving infantry formation that can't adapt to changing tactical situations or escape from hostile forces. The resort to cannibalism represents complete breakdown of military discipline and Persian cultural norms. Persian religion strictly prohibits consuming human flesh under any circumstances. For Persian soldiers to violate this taboo indicates that military authority has collapsed and survival instinct has overwhelmed cultural conditioning. The lottery system for selecting victims demonstrates that even cannibalism retains some organizational structure. Rather than descending into chaotic violence, the army maintains enough discipline to implement systematic procedures for horror. It's perhaps the most disturbing evidence of Persian administrative efficiency. They can organize anything, including their own consumption, Cambyses, rather than acknowledging his strategic error and ordering retreat, doubles down on the invasion. He's so committed to proving his invincibility that he's willing to literally consume his own army rather than admit failure. The psychology behind this decision reveals the particular pathology of absolute power. Admitting error would require acknowledging that divine authority can make mistakes, undermining the theological foundation of Persian royal power. For a king who claims direct communication with Ahura Mazda, strategic failure becomes impossible to acknowledge without destroying the ideological basis of his rule. Persian royal culture emphasizes personal responsibility and strategic competence as evidence of divine favor. Kings who make good decisions demonstrate that the gods support their rule. Kings who make catastrophic errors suggest that divine protection has been withdrawn, making them illegitimate regardless of their bloodline. Cambyses faces an impossible choice: retreat and admit that his judgment is fallible, or continue the campaign and watch his army destroy itself. Either option threatens his authority, but retreat represents immediate acknowledgement of failure, while continuing offers the possibility that some miracle might vindicate his decision. The mathematical reality is inescapable. The army lacks resources to reach Ethiopia and lacks resources to return safely to Egypt. Continuing the advance accelerates the consumption of remaining supplies while moving further from potential rescue, but retreating admits defeat and provides no guarantee of survival given the distances involved and resources already consumed. When Cambyses finally returns to Memphis, he's leading the skeletal remains of what was once the Persian Empire's premier military force. The expedition has consumed roughly 80% of the army through starvation, disease, and cannibalism, leaving behind a trail of Persian bones scattered across African wilderness. The surviving soldiers present a disturbing spectacle of military breakdown. Their equipment is lost or abandoned, their discipline shattered by months of horror, their effectiveness as fighting force eliminated by malnutrition and psychological trauma. These are no longer Persian elite troops, they're refugee survivors of an administrative disaster disguised as military campaign. Persian military prestige, built through decades of successful conquest, evaporates in the Ethiopian desert, along with thousands of soldiers who died for literally nothing. The strategic consequences extend far beyond immediate casualties to include damage to Persian reputation that will encourage rebellion and resistance throughout the empire. But instead of acknowledging the disaster or attempting to rebuild his forces, Cambyses discovers that the Egyptians are celebrating the arrival of a new Apis bull. To them, this represents divine blessing and renewal after the trauma of conquest. To Cambyses, it's personal insult, requiring immediate, violent response. The contrast couldn't be more stark. While Cambyses was destroying his own army in pursuit of impossible objectives, Egyptian civilization continued its religious traditions with quiet determination. The appearance of a new sacred bull suggests that Egyptian gods have survived Persian assault and are reclaiming their authority over the Nile Valley. The scene that follows would be comic if it weren't so horrifying. Cambyses, fresh from presiding over military catastrophe, decides that a sacred bull represents the greatest threat to Persian authority in Egypt. He storms into the religious ceremony and stabs the animal, then mocks the Egyptian priests for believing in gods that bleed. The psychological symbolism is perfect. A king who's just destroyed his own army through incompetent leadership is attacking a bull for being mortal. Its projection on a scale that would impress modern therapists. If modern therapists treated clients who could execute people for suggesting they had mental health issues, Cambyses' attack on the second Apis bull represents the complete abandonment of strategic thinking in favor of purely emotional response. There's no military purpose served by killing the animal, no administrative advantage gained by traumatizing the priests, no political benefit from demonstrating Persian contempt for Egyptian religion. The act serves only to satisfy Cambyses' need to prove that he retains some form of power after the Ethiopian humiliation. Unable to defeat human enemies or overcome natural obstacles, he directs his frustration toward a religious symbol that can't fight back. Egyptian witnesses to this second blasphemy understand that they're watching more than royal cruelty. They're observing the complete mental breakdown of their conqueror. The man who defeated their armies and occupied their cities has revealed himself as fundamentally unstable, creating opportunities for resistance that didn't exist while he appeared competent. What makes Cambyses' final period particularly terrifying is how his madness becomes systematized. He's not just randomly violent, He's developed elaborate theological justifications for his cruelty, convinced himself that destroying Egyptian culture is a sacred mission ordained by Persian gods. He begins targeting his own family with increasing frequency. His wife's sister dies under mysterious circumstances that strongly suggest murder. The woman who should have been his closest confidant and strongest supporter becomes another victim of his paranoid spiral. The murder of his sister wife eliminates the last personal relationship that might have provided emotional stability or rational counsel. Persian royal marriages serve strategic purposes, but they also create family bonds that can anchor rulers to reality. By destroying these relationships, Cambyses eliminates the social connections that might have prevented his complete psychological isolation. His closest advisors start disappearing or dying in accidents that coincidentally eliminate anyone who might question his judgment. The Persian court becomes a death trap where survival depends on anticipating the king's paranoid fantasies and eliminating perceived threats before Cambyses decides they exist. Persian court culture, traditionally encouraging honest counsel and direct communication, transforms into elaborate theater where everyone performs enthusiasm for royal decisions while secretly calculating survival strategies. The institutional mechanisms that normally prevent royal isolation and bad decision-making break down completely. Your job as a court official becomes increasingly surreal as you try to maintain normal imperial administration while your boss descends into complete psychosis. Tax records still need updating. Military units still need supplies. Provincial governors still send reports requiring responses, but every administrative decision now carries potential death penalty consequences if Cambyses interprets it as evidence of disloyalty, incompetence, or insufficient enthusiasm for his cultural destruction campaign. You spend your days writing official correspondence that reads like bureaucratic fiction. The king's divine majesty was pleased to demonstrate the powerlessness of Egyptian false gods through sacred combat with their bull deity. Tribute assessments for the Memphis province should reflect the improved spiritual condition of the territory following this religious correction. Persian imperial bureaucracy was designed for rational administration of conquered territories. It assumes that policy decisions will be based on practical considerations like revenue optimization, strategic security, and long-term stability. It wasn't designed to handle a ruler who makes decisions based on prophetic dreams and personal vendettas against Egyptian livestock. The disconnect between administrative requirements and royal reality creates impossible situations where competent governance becomes treasonous activity. Suggesting practical solutions to obvious problems gets interpreted as criticism of royal judgment. Implementing effective policies without explicit royal approval becomes evidence of excessive ambition. You find yourself documenting the systematic destruction of everything that makes the Persian Empire successful, while maintaining official enthusiasm for policies that are obviously self-destructive. It's like being the corporate communications director for a company whose CEO is deliberately sabotaging every profitable division. While Cambyses is busy transforming Egypt into a wasteland, news finally reaches Memphis about the situation in Persia. Gamata the Magian has successfully assumed Smyrna's identity and is ruling the empire with surprising competence and popular support. The fake Smyrna is everything. Cambyses isn't rational, predictable, focused on practical governance rather than megalomaniacal cultural destruction. He's reduced taxes, ended unpopular military campaigns, and restored traditional Persian religious practices that Cambyses had neglected or violated. Persian nobles, initially reluctant to support usurpation, are beginning to prefer effective impostor rule to authentic madness. It's a damning indictment of Cambyses' leadership that his subjects would rather be governed by a lying priest than their legitimate king. The communication lag between Egypt and Persia means Cambyses learns about the rebellion months after it began, when Gamata has already consolidated power and eliminated potential opposition. Ancient logistics make rapid response impossible. By the time a message reaches Memphis, the political situation it describes has already changed completely. Persian imperial communications depend on relay stations, mounted messengers, and favorable weather conditions. A message from the capital to Egypt takes weeks under ideal circumstances and months if natural disasters or military conflicts disrupt the routes. By ancient standards, this represents remarkably efficient information transfer, but it's completely inadequate for managing political crises that develop rapidly. Cambyses faces a classic ancient world strategic dilemma. He can't suppress the rebellion in Persia without abandoning Egypt, but he can't maintain control of Egypt without the military resources he'd need to reconquer Persia. His army is scattered across the Persian Empire, with major units committed to garrison duty in conquered territories. The Ethiopian expedition consumed his strategic reserve. The forces remaining in Egypt are barely sufficient to maintain occupation against a population that's becoming increasingly hostile to Persian rule. Ancient military logistics make rapid troop redeployment nearly impossible. Moving an army from Egypt to Persia requires months of preparation, thousands of tons of supplies, and coordination with dozens of provincial governors who may or may not remain loyal to Cambyses. Meanwhile, every day of delay allows Gamata to strengthen his position and eliminate potential supporters of the legitimate dynasty. The rebellion is gaining momentum while Cambyses' response capabilities deteriorate through his own self-destructive policies. The mathematics of ancient warfare are unforgiving. Armies need time to mobilize, supplies to travel, and secure communications to coordinate. None of these requirements can be accelerated through royal decree or divine intervention. Physical reality constrains even god-kings, and Cambyses has spent months violating every principle of successful imperial administration. Cambyses' end comes with a kind of ironic symmetry that ancient historians loved. He dies from a wound that mirrors his attack on the sacred Apis bull. While mounting his horse for the march back to Persia, his sword breaks through its scabbard and stabs him in the thigh, the exact same location where he wounded the Egyptian god. The injury itself shouldn't be fatal, but infection in the ancient world often turns minor wounds into death sentences. Without modern antibiotics or surgical procedures, a simple cut can become gangrene, and gangrene can become systemic poisoning that kills even the most powerful rulers. Persian royal medicine, despite being the most advanced medical care available in the ancient world, can't overcome the basic limitations of pre-modern medical knowledge. Persian physicians understand wound care, herbal remedies, and surgical techniques, but they have no concept of bacterial infection or antiseptic procedures. Cambyses spends his final days in agony, perhaps finally understanding that his systematic brutality has accomplished nothing except destroying his own empire. The Egyptian conquest that should have been his greatest triumph has become the vehicle for his destruction. The irony of his death wound matching his attack on the Apis bull doesn't escape Persian courtiers, though none dare mention it aloud. Egyptian priests, when they learn of his condition, interpret it as divine justice, proof that their gods retain power to punish those who violate sacred law. His death leaves the Persian Empire in chaos, a usurper ruling from the capital, rebellions erupting in provincial territories, military units scattered across 3 continents, and no clear succession plan for legitimate dynastic restoration. The immediate aftermath of Cambyses' death creates a power vacuum that threatens to fragment the Persian Empire into competing regional kingdoms. Without clear royal authority, provincial governors must decide whether to support Gaumata's usurpation, declare independence, or wait for someone else to claim legitimate rule. Persian imperial administration depends on personal loyalty to the king rather than institutional allegiance to abstract governmental structures. When the king dies without clear succession arrangements, the entire system becomes vulnerable to collapse as individual commanders and governors make independent decisions about their allegiances. The army in Egypt faces particularly difficult choices. They're too far from Persia to influence events at the imperial capital, but they're also too isolated to maintain Egyptian occupation without support from the imperial center. Egyptian resistance, previously contained by fear of Persian retaliation, begins to increase as word spreads of Cambyses' death and imperial confusion. Egyptian priests, observing Persian disarray, begin quietly organizing resistance networks that had been dormant during effective occupation. The systematic cultural destruction that Cambyses pursued has created deep Egyptian resentment that only Persian military supremacy had suppressed. Enter Darius and his 6 co-conspirators, the Persian nobles, who will eventually restore legitimate rule and save the empire from complete collapse. But their rise to power involves its own brutal calculations and methodical violence that make Cambyses' random cruelty look almost amateur by comparison. The 7 don't just oppose Gaumata, they represent a different model of Persian imperialism, one based on efficient administration rather than megalomaniacal cultural destruction. They understand that successful empires extract wealth from conquered territories without destroying the infrastructure that generates that wealth. Their conspiracy involves months of careful planning, intelligence gathering, and political maneuvering. Unlike Cambyses' impulsive violence, their approach to regime change is calculated, systematic, and designed to minimize damage to imperial institutions while maximizing damage to their enemies. The 7 include some of the most powerful noble families in the Persian Empire. Darius represents the Achaemenid clan. Otans brings the support of his extended family network, and the other conspirators contribute military expertise, administrative experience, and regional political connections. Their planning process reveals the sophisticated political intelligence that Cambyses had abandoned in favor of paranoid isolation. They analyze Gaumata's support base, identify potential allies and enemies, assess military resources available to each side, and develop contingency plans for various scenarios. The elimination of Gaumata and his supporters reads like ancient political thriller: false identities, midnight assassinations, coded messages, and split-second timing that determines whether the conspirators save the empire or die as traitors. The conspiracy's success depends on exploiting a crucial weakness in Gaumata's position. His impersonation of Smerdis requires avoiding close examination by people who knew the real prince. This necessity for concealment creates opportunities for conspirators who understand palace security protocols. Darius and his allies use their legitimate access to royal facilities to position themselves for simultaneous strikes against Gaumata and his key supporters. The operation requires precise coordination across multiple locations, with each conspirator responsible for specific targets and timing. The actual assassination takes place in the royal quarters, where Gaumata has been living in seclusion to maintain his impersonation. The conspirators overcome palace guards through surprise and superior numbers, then hunt down the usurper in rooms designed to protect him from exactly this kind of attack. The violence is swift, brutal, and efficient. A professional execution that eliminates the threat while demonstrating the conspirators' competence and determination. Unlike Cambyses' theatrical cruelty, their violence serves clear strategic purposes and ends immediately. Once those purposes are achieved, Darius's rise to power represents more than dynastic restoration. It's the birth of the administrative system that will make Persia the ancient world's most successful empire. Instead of Cambyses' chaotic brutality, Darius implements methodical exploitation based on sustainable tribute extraction. The empire gets divided into 20 provinces, each with standardized tax assessments, appointed governors, and regular administrative oversight. It's imperialism as bureaucratic science, designed to maximize revenue while minimizing rebellion and administrative costs. Persian conquest under Darius becomes predictable and systematic. Invade, occupy, assess resources, implement taxation, integrate local elites into imperial hierarchy. Repeat. It's the ancient equivalent of corporate expansion, with detailed protocols for everything from currency standardization to judicial procedure. But this administrative efficiency comes with its own moral costs. Darius's system may be less psychotic than Cambyses' rule, but it's arguably more effective at grinding conquered populations into imperial machinery. Efficient exploitation can be more destructive than chaotic brutality because it's sustainable over decades rather than years. The 20 provinces represent a masterpiece of administrative organization that balances local autonomy with imperial control. Each province is large enough to be economically viable, but small enough to prevent governors from accumulating power that might threaten royal authority. Provincial governance combines Persian administrative oversight with local cultural accommodation. Unlike Cambyses' cultural destruction campaign, Darius allows conquered peoples to maintain their religious practices and social customs as long as they pay tribute and accept Persian political authority. Fresh from reorganizing the empire and eliminating internal threats, Darius decides to test Persian military capabilities against the most elusive enemy in the ancient world. The Scythians of the Black Sea region. Scythian society represents everything that makes Persian military doctrine obsolete. They're nomadic, no cities to capture, decentralized, no government to overthrow, and tactically innovative, no predictable battle formations to counter. Persian armies are designed for conventional warfare against settled civilizations with permanent territories and centralized leadership. The standard playbook involves siege warfare, decisive battles, and negotiated surrenders that transform conquest into administrative problem-solving. But Scythians don't follow the playbook. They have no permanent settlements to besiege, no central authority to negotiate with, and no inclination to fight pitched battles where Persian numerical superiority would prove decisive. Scythian military culture emphasizes mobility, flexibility, and asymmetric warfare that neutralizes traditional Persian advantages. Their entire society is organized around the principle that avoiding unfavorable engagements is more important than winning favorable ones. The challenge they present to Persian imperialism goes beyond military tactics to fundamental questions about the nature of conquest itself. How do you conquer people who won't stay conquered? How do you extract tribute from populations that can disappear into the steppes? How do you negotiate with leaders who have no permanent authority to make binding agreements? Darius's Scythian expedition becomes a demonstration of Persian organizational capabilities at their absolute peak. The army that crosses into Scythia is probably the largest and most professional military force in human history to that point. 700,000 men with standardized equipment, coordinated logistics, and battle-tested leadership. The logistics of moving this force across 3 continents represent an administrative achievement that won't be matched for centuries. Persian quartermasters coordinate supply chains that stretch from the Indian Ocean to the Black Sea, ensuring that hundreds of thousands of soldiers receive regular food, water, equipment, and medical care. The army includes contingents from dozens of conquered peoples, each contributing their specialized military capabilities to the overall force. Egyptian engineers build bridges and siege equipment, Phoenician sailors provide naval support, Arabian camel troops handle desert operations, Greek hoplites serve as heavy infantry. This diversity represents both Persian strength and potential weakness. The empire's ability to coordinate military resources from across the known world demonstrates unprecedented organizational sophistication, but managing troops who speak different languages, follow different customs, and maintain varying levels of loyalty to Persian authority creates complex command challenges. The bridge construction across the Bosporus and the Danube illustrates Persian engineering capabilities at their most impressive. These aren't simple river crossings, they're complex construction projects that require months of planning, thousands of workers, and innovative solutions to unprecedented technical challenges. Darius's Scythian expedition becomes a masterclass in how military superiority can become strategically irrelevant when the enemy refuses to cooperate with your operational assumptions. The Persian army that crosses into Scythia is like bringing a modern aircraft carrier to fight pirates in speedboats. Every Persian advantage, disciplined formations, coordinated logistics, siege capabilities, numerical superiority, becomes meaningless when the enemy won't stand still long enough to be defeated. But numbers become meaningless when the enemy won't stand still long enough to be countered. Scythian strategy is elegantly simple. Retreat faster than the Persians can advance, destroy everything useful along the way, and let logistics do the killing. Persian supply lines, designed for campaigns in civilized territories with established infrastructure, break down completely in the Scythian steppes. There are no cities to plunder, no granaries to capture, no local populations to conscript as laborers. The vast Persian army becomes its own worst enemy. The larger the force, the more supplies it requires, the slower it moves, and the more vulnerable it becomes to the kind of harassment tactics that Scythians have perfected over centuries of steppe warfare. Scythian mobility makes Persian scouting and intelligence gathering nearly impossible. Persian cavalry, supposedly the most mobile element of their army, can't match Scythian horsemen who've been riding since childhood and know every water source, mountain pass, and hidden valley in their territory. What makes the Scythian campaign particularly frustrating for Persian commanders is that it's designed as much to humiliate as to defeat. Scythian tactics aren't just militarily effective, they're psychologically devastating to an army accustomed to clear victories and decisive conclusions. The Scythians sent Darius gifts that read like ancient trolling: a bird, a mouse, a frog, and 5 arrows. The message, decoded by Persian advisors, essentially translates to, unless you can fly like birds, hide like mice, or swim like frogs, our arrows will kill you all. It's the ancient equivalent of military trash talk, delivered with surgical precision, designed to demonstrate that Persian threats are meaningless against an enemy that won't play by Persian rules. Scythian raids on Persian positions follow the same psychological pattern: attack when the Persians are vulnerable, disappear before they can respond effectively, repeat until Persian morale collapses from sheer frustration. The Scythians understand that Persian military culture depends on demonstrating superiority through decisive victories. By refusing to provide opportunities for such victories, they're attacking the psychological foundation that holds Persian armies together. Persian soldiers, recruited from cultures that view military service as pathway to glory and advancement, find themselves trapped in a campaign where courage and skill are irrelevant because there are no enemies to fight or victories to achieve. The Scythian campaign exposes fundamental limitations in Persian military doctrine that successful conquest had previously concealed. Persian armies are optimized for campaigns with clear objectives, definite timelines, and measurable success criteria. But how do you measure progress in a war where the enemy's primary strategy is making you waste resources chasing shadows? How do you claim victory when there's nothing to capture and no one authorized to surrender? Darius finds himself commanding the ancient world's most powerful military force in a campaign that can't be won through conventional means. Every tactical success, routing Scythian cavalry, capturing territory, seizing supplies, proves strategically meaningless because the Scythians simply retreat and continue operations from new positions. The campaign becomes a race between Persian logistical capacity and Scythian endurance, with both sides betting they can outlast the other's ability to maintain operations in hostile territory. Persian military doctrine assumes that superior organization and overwhelming force will eventually break enemy resistance. But Scythian resistance doesn't depend on maintaining fixed positions or protecting specific territories that can be overwhelmed through superior force. The strategic stalemate reveals that Persian military superiority has limits that hadn't been tested during campaigns against conventional enemies. When facing opponents who refuse to fight conventional battles, Persian advantages become irrelevant. The Persian retreat from Scythia reads like ancient military nightmare fuel. 700,000 men trying to extract themselves from territory that offers no supplies, no reliable maps, and constant harassment from enemies who know every river crossing and mountain pass. Persian discipline, stressed by months of futile campaigning, begins breaking down as supply shortages become critical and casualty rates accelerate. Units start abandoning equipment to increase marching speed. Sick and wounded soldiers get left behind because the army can't spare resources for medical care. Scythian pursuit tactics turn the retreat into running battle across hundreds of miles of hostile territory. Persian rearguard units fight daily skirmishes against enemies who appear without warning, inflict casualties, and disappear before reinforcements can arrive. The psychological toll becomes as devastating as the physical costs. Persian soldiers who entered Scythia convinced of their invincibility return home, understanding that military superiority has limits and that some enemies can't be conquered through conventional means. The retreat demonstrates how quickly military advantages can evaporate when logistical systems collapse. The same organizational efficiency that made the Persian army so formidable becomes a liability when those systems can't adapt to unexpected circumstances. Supply shortages create cascading failures throughout the army. Hungry soldiers become less effective fighters. Tired troops make more mistakes. Equipment failures multiply as maintenance becomes impossible. Medical problems that would be minor inconveniences with adequate supplies become life-threatening emergencies. The Persian retreat culminates in a crisis at the Danube Bridge that illuminates the political tensions within the empire. Darius has left Ionian Greek commanders to guard his escape route, but his long absence has given them time to reconsider their loyalty to Persian authority. The Scythians, pursuing the retreating Persian army, arrive at the bridge first and attempt to convince the Ionian guards to abandon their posts. Their argument is compelling. Darius has obviously failed in his mission, his army is in full retreat, and the Greeks have an opportunity to regain their independence by destroying the bridge. The debate among the Ionian commanders reveals the complex motivations that hold the Persian Empire together. Some argue for rebellion, seeing this as their best chance to escape Persian domination. Others point out that their political positions depend on Persian support, making rebellion potentially suicidal. Even if it succeeds, the decision to maintain the bridge, while giving the appearance of dismantling it, represents the kind of political compromise that keeps empires functioning. The Greeks preserved their options while avoiding immediate commitment to either rebellion or absolute loyalty. When Darius finally arrives at the bridge, exhausted and demoralized by his Scythian failure, he finds his escape route intact, but his authority diminished. The campaign has demonstrated that Persian power has limits, encouraging potential rebels throughout the empire. Both Cambyses' madness and Darius's Scythian campaign illustrate fundamental truths about imperial power that remain relevant millennia later. Military strength without strategic wisdom becomes self-destructive, and administrative efficiency without cultural sensitivity creates long-term instability. Cambyses represents the pathology of unlimited power, how absolute authority can corrupt absolutely, transforming effective leaders into monsters who destroy everything they touch. His Egyptian campaign succeeds militarily, but fails strategically because he mistakes conquest for control. Darius embodies the opposite approach: systematic, rational, sustainable imperialism based on administrative competence rather than personal charisma. But his Scythian expedition demonstrates that even the most efficient empire can't solve every problem through organization and overwhelming force. The Persian Empire, under both rulers, reveals the eternal tension between expansion and consolidation that faces every imperial power. Successful conquest creates resources and confidence that encourage further expansion, but each new conquest creates new administrative challenges and potential sources of rebellion. Imperial success breeds the very problems that destroy empires. Overconfidence leads to strategic overextension. Administrative complexity creates opportunities for corruption and inefficiency, and cultural diversity generates centrifugal forces that tear apart centralized authority. Standing in the ruins of Memphis, watching Persian soldiers patrol streets that once bustled with Egyptian commerce and culture, you understand something that neither Cambyses nor Darius fully grasped. Conquest always costs more than conquerors expect. Egypt may be subdued, but Egyptian civilization, thousands of years of accumulated knowledge, art, and wisdom, has been permanently damaged. The priests who maintained that knowledge are dead or scattered. The institutions that preserved it are destroyed or corrupted. Persian rule may be more efficient than pharaonic administration, but efficiency isn't the same as excellence. The Persians can extract tribute and maintain order, but they can't replicate the cultural achievements they've destroyed. The human cost extends beyond battlefield casualties to include the erasure of entire ways of life, the silencing of languages, the abandonment of traditions that took centuries to develop and can't be recovered once lost. Scythian resistance, while militarily successful, comes at enormous cost to Scythian society. Their strategy of retreating and destroying everything useful saves their independence, but devastates their economy and disrupts social structures that had taken generations to develop. The Persian soldiers who survived the Scythian campaign return home, changed by their experience of failure and futility. Many will never fully recover from the psychological trauma of watching the world's most powerful army defeated by opponents they never really got to fight. As you watch the sun set over the Nile, painting the pyramids in shades of blood and gold that would make Persian court artists weep with envy, you realize that empires rise and fall with the inevitability of floods and famines. Cambyses destroyed himself through excess. Darius will expand the empire to unprecedented size before his own successors face rebellions, defeats, and ultimate collapse. The Persians who conquered Egypt will themselves be conquered by Greeks, who will be conquered by Romans, who will fall to barbarians in an endless cycle of imperial rise and decline. But the Nile continues flowing, indifferent to human ambition and imperial pretension. Egyptian farmers still plant crops according to flood cycles that predate Persian conquest by millennia. The desert still claims the bones of soldiers who died for empires whose names are already being forgotten. In the end, the only permanent victory belongs to time itself, which conquers all conquerors and outlasts every empire that ever imagined itself eternal. The Persian Empire under Cambyses and Darius may seem like ancient history, but its lessons about power, madness, and the costs of conquest echo through every age when humans convince themselves that force can solve problems that require wisdom and that domination can substitute for understanding. You close your administrative scrolls and prepare for another day of documenting imperial glory and imperial madness, knowing that tomorrow will bring new atrocities to record and new evidence that absolute power corrupts absolutely, no matter how divine its pretensions or how efficient its administration. Because in the Persian Empire, as in every empire before and since, the most dangerous enemy isn't external invasion. It's the internal corruption that transforms liberators into oppressors and protectors into destroyers. And that corruption, unfortunately, is always just one royal decree away from claiming its next victim. Sweet dreams, Cambyses. The Nile still flows through Memphis, carrying the same waters that witnessed your madness and your empire's glory. And perhaps, as you close your eyes tonight, you'll understand that the greatest conquests are the ones that build rather than destroy, that unite rather than divide, and that outlast the kings who achieve them.